I'm a big fan of bringing new people in to the industry if we can, because it is addictive. We can get them hooked, can't we? Once you've had a classic car, if you've really enjoyed it, and you've been to all the clubs and the meets, it's quite a cool social scene, or it is for car nerds like me. But no, I am very honest. I mean, a lot of my sisters like, have you had one before? Have you had a classic car before? And we have a big conversation. It's like, look, you are going to have a rolling maintenance program. This isn't a service it once a year. You could have a year where you service it and nothing goes wrong. You could have a year of it's in and it's out. It's just kind of the way it goes. Recommend you spend as much as you can on a decent mechanic. Prevention rather than cure. I kind of have a budget. I go through the whole thing. I mean, a lot of, they'll come out and they'll sort of say, it looks really cool and it's what I want. You can tell when people are looking at a car whether they've had them before, because they know exactly where to go to look for, well-known problem spots on particular cars. But, a big thing with me sometimes is it's like, do you want to take it around the block? And they'll say, yeah. And they'll say something like, well, do you want to drive? And it's like, have you driven a left-hand drive before? They're like, no. It's like, ooh. We're on a farm and very sort of narrow lanes, and there's a certain route I can go where they're unlikely to see anybody. But I took the photographer that I work with took the Camaro out, and we do again. It's a big thing. You think you don't want to drive it, you'd be surprised how easy they are to drive. And it was a case of, oh, you are quite far over to the right, Lewis. You're quite far. Okay, back into the left. And I just don't know. I didn't look as panicked as I felt in the video, and nor did he. But I had to edit it all out, because all it was like left a bit, let you quite far over, left a bit, keep your eye on the mirrors. So a lot of it is, and it's sort of like, don't look at the road, look at your wing mirrors. You need to see a white line in one and a curb in the other. But it's quite deceiving driving a left-hand drive car and looking straight out and thinking you're in your lane when you're actually
my brother-in-law came over from Australia a little while ago, and he said he wanted to take the Firebird out, and I live on country lanes, and I was terrified. I spent being obviously in the right-hand seat. I was over the white line with cars just coming at me all the time, and I was like exactly the same. Maybe you want to go over a little bit.
So should we just pull over, and we'll just pop it over here and I'll swap and I'll drive.
Let me show you how I know what my daughter feels like now when I take her out in it.
Well, I mean, it's some left-hand drives. An early 911, it makes no difference. They're so narrow. It doesn't really make much difference which side of the car you're sat in. But some of the Yank tanks, it's quite a marked difference when you think you're in a lane and you're although people do get out of your way, I have to say. Little old lady in the big American car on the wrong side, they tend to give way. And there's been quite a shift in recent years to the sort of Resto mod, or the rat rod look, where they're structurally sound. They've got a different engine in, they've got different running gear, they've got a different gearbox. And there's a real kind of divide in the industry about whether that's okay. And I sort of think if it's bringing new people in, if it's bringing teenagers in to the classic car market because they want to buy something and make it cool and what they want to drive and what they want to do, I'd rather that than the industry just die out because nobody wants an Austin 7 anymore.
I've got an MGB with an MX-5 engine and gearbox.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and I've got well, I've ruined it now by trying to put a supercharger on it. But I've got a standard MGB as well. And they've both got their own kind of thing. I like the standard MGB. That's good to go for a black end. But the MX-5 one is turnkey, and you could use it every day if you wanted to. So I think it's a really good move. I'm going to have to ask
about the supercharger, though. Can I ask where that came from?
Because I'm a child. And I wanted to make lots of kettle noises as I pulled away. Boiling
They're
kettle
toys.
Noises.
They are toys, aren't they? They're hobbies and they're toys.
Sounds fantastic when it's bolted on. Well, yeah, it sounds fantastic when it's bolted on. Because I thought I wanted more power, but I think the reality is an MGB with 2 brake horsepower is probably not the best fun on the road anyway, is it?
No, I mean, I get positive and negative feedback. I do make some sort of modern upgrades sometimes, and I got slated on a Bristol 406 because I put a electronic starter on it. It was just a really lazy starter, and just for me to be able to go in and start it. But the bloke that bought it was not a fan. But obviously I kept the original, and it went with the car. And he said the first thing I'm doing is ripping this kind of modern nonsense out and putting it in. And that's fine if you want to spend 20 minutes every time you want to take it out getting it started. I think if we can make them more usable and easier to drive in modern traffic, I keep sort of going back to that. And I think a lot of people, they have them, and you probably see this more with your stuff, map them to within an inch of their life, but do nothing to the braking system
or the cooling system, or anything like that. It's all just power, power, power till it goes pop.
Yeah.
Till it goes bang, and then it's uninsured because you didn't declare it, and everybody's the plan falls apart, doesn't it? But yeah, I find that in the classic car world, because you tend to take them to a garage who knows them to say, can we have it breathed on a little bit? Can we do? And they'll say, well, yeah, but then you'll need to do this to the gearbox won't cope, or the brakes won't cope, or the cooling system won't cope. So I think the upgrades on the older stuff tends to be pretty sensible and pretty well thought through. Sympathetic upgrades I'm a big fan of. If it keeps them on the road and if it keeps an audience there for them.
Difference between whether you want something in your garage as like a museum piece, like that is how it was, that's what they used to drive, versus I actually still want to be able to enjoy it, like you say, winding your handle to get it going.
Yeah, there's the purists, and in lots of cases I am one of them. I love originality. Even stuff like interiors, I'd rather have a horrifically tatty original interior than a freshly colonised one if it can be saved. It's only original once, and I love originality first and foremost, but I understand for the industry that Resto modern improvements and sympathetic upgrades are probably what are going to keep new people coming in, and that's got to be a good thing, and I do recognise that.
See, I've got this horrendous idea of buying an LS430 Lexus and putting the engine and gearbox in the Firebird, so I could then just drive it as a daily car everywhere all of the time.
I'm just a bit sick in my mouth. No, don't do that.
I know, it's horrendous, isn't it? But I mean, that V8 does sound amazing. But you could actually go and use the car every single day, couldn't you?
You can use them every day if they're set up right. They will run every day.
And you can do 10 miles to the gallon. I haven't even got a fuel gauge on mine. I just top it up every time before I go out and top it up after I've come back.
I really worry when people on cars like that ask me what mile per gallon is. It's not the car for you.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Yeah, that's very true.
You need to speak to Sam's wizard mechanic, James, because setting your car up right probably is going to be a lot cheaper than buying a Lexus and swapping it over and getting it converted and all that sort of stuff.
I have got, as a dealer as well, I've always got to keep half an eye on resale value. And matching them as an originality on the American stuff, because it's rare, does add value, without a doubt.
That's why I buy cheap stuff, because I'm not going to muck around with it. I wouldn't, yeah.
But again, I'm all for that as well. It's whatever makes you happy. It's a hobby, and it should be something that, it shouldn't be a worry or a hassle or an expense you can't afford. It should be your pride and joy.
If you want to paint it with a fence sprayer, you should be able to.
Yeah, it's your car. You're at liberty to do whatever you want with it.
Going back to, you were saying about the 3-month warranty you give on your cars. Realistically, what can you agree to cover on what would your warranty cover on one of your classic cars?
Well, it's the legislation that covers it, basically. So my cars are all sold as seen. They're all open to any inspection. I encourage independent inspections as well, every time. I think it gives people peace of mind. In terms of wear and tear, it's really difficult on old cars. It's not if, it's when they'll go wrong. It's the nature of the beast sort of thing. You tend to sell them to people who are pretty sensible classic car people and who understand that. And I think as long as I've described them properly, which I do, and I invite any inspection, we always do walk around videos. If somebody's buying distance selling, which I know is another subject that we could cover, that I've sort of sent them videos, and I'm quite harsh in my descriptions. I always crawl underneath them as well. I'll point out anything and everything I found. I'd sort of do quite detailed walk around videos. We also have the option of, you can have a new part or you can have a reconditioned part. A lot of the time we actually have to fabricate parts because you literally can't get them anymore. So we sort of don't have the modern mechanic doing here's a list of here's our parts list and here's what it costs and yes or no. We kind of do have options in that, reconditioned parts are very much part of our industry and often better than the brand new aftermarket stuff that maybe comes in from China. So, we tend to work quite closely with our mechanics as opposed to against them. You will occasionally get somebody. A lot of my customers ask me to recommend mechanics to maintain them, and I'll always say, have you got a good classic car mechanic for you to help you maintain it? And if they haven't, I'll put them in touch with somebody, because what I fear is somebody driving it onto a quick fit forecourt because the brakes are squeaking, and just putting the car.
They put it on the brake roller, and they're like, "Whoa, this is 10% of what it should be."
Yeah.
I know, and they were in period, like I say, stuff like Silver Shadows. They've got they're big, heavy cars. They use the same brake pads as a Ford Granada. They've just got more of them. They've just got massive calipers, and you have to kind of understand how that. And it's a hydraulic braking system. You have to understand how it works to be able to service them. It's not, and drum brakes. We have, especially on the American stuff, drums all round or drums at the back. And, you do have to sort of sometimes stand up and crush your fingers and shut your eyes when you want it to stop quickly. But, back in period, the car in front wasn't stopping any quicker than that anyway. So it wasn't a safety issue.
I guess it's more important for you than probably anybody to decide who you actually want to sell a car to sometimes decide, actually, I don't think this is the right thing for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't do any viewings until I've sent them a walk around video, because I'm a big fan of not wasting people's time. So if somebody wants to come and look at a car, I have a walk around video for all of them, brutally honest, pointing out any faults I found with it. If they still want to come and see the car, then they know what they're coming to see. They're not wasting their time.
Kind of leads me on to, like, if I share your Instagram page now, I wanted to ask you just how often... Well, there's nothing bad on there, is there?
A bit worried about this now.
But just that, obviously, you are sort of active on social media, so you'll post these cars and you put them in front of people that weren't necessarily looking.
Yeah.
And I could see, it puts you in front of people who probably have got the money and maybe have thought about it for a long time. But I wondered, how many times do you get someone who wants to come buy a car from you, whatever that car is? Let's say it's that Camaro.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, I've never really wanted one. I've never really known much about them, but I saw it. It looks cool. I'm impulsively deciding, like, I could have that for 20,000. Do you get that a lot? Because I feel like
I
you
do.
would.
Yeah, no, I do. And
What would you say if someone was watching and they were looking to get a classic, but they had like about 5k to play with, and they wanted to use it like quite regularly, almost daily? What would be your recommendation at the moment?
Do you know what? I think there's different eras to go for. I think if you want that traditional open top British motoring, I don't think you can go wrong with an MG. Or an Austin. I'm a big fan of a midget, and I think for $5,000 you can have a really good, solid, usable, practical classic. I love an Austin 7. I think they're an absolute joy to drive, and I get that not everybody's cup of tea. But for pre-war stuff, you can for between 5 and 10 pick up a really nice, usable.
Going down quite a lot, isn't it? Pre-war.
It is. Yeah, we are literally dying off. And again, if Resto modding gets... Look, there's always this big thing with classic cars: is how do we keep them cool? How do we make them cool for the next generation? Where do you breed your next load of car nerds from? And we have this kind of generational thing where cars are 30, 40 years old, because the biggest selling point for me is nostalgia. They tend to be cars that people either have really wonderful childhood memories of, or they've always wanted one, or they were on telly when they were a kid. And nostalgia is a really, really big driver. So I think if it's a car you've always wanted, it's just kind of going for the best example you can afford. I think from the 80s, if you want something that's hilarious at 50 miles an hour that you can drive at a Fiat X19, baby Ferrari, they are, and they've not had a moment. You can still get those for really handy money. I think if you've got 10 or 15 grand to spend and you're an 80s kid, Peugeot 205s, Mark II Golfs, I don't think there's a catch-all answer to that, because I think it's got to be whatever puts a huge smile on your face, is within your budget to buy and maintain, and that you're going to enjoy, really. I think that's the crux of it for me, is if it doesn't put a huge smile on your face when you walk towards it and when you're driving it, then what's the point? The EV revolution is kind of having a bit of it's having the opposite effect, I think, because it's giving us a real renaissance. If you used to really enjoy whatever your company car was, if you used to drive an M3 and it was your company car and you loved it, and you've now been given a Tesla and you're not, not so much, you're more likely to go and spend 10 grand on a Golf or a Peugeot or a Fiat X19 or something that you can go lane bashing at the weekends, thrash the life out of it, have an absolute ball, and then pop it back in the garage and get back in your Tesla for work on Monday morning. So I think there's a backlash. I'm certainly seeing a backlash.
That's interesting feedback.
And it's another reason why I'm really keen that my business model is moving more towards, affordable, practical 70s or 80s classic. And the thing is as well, do you know what? Run it for a summer. if you don't want to pay to store it over the winter, or you're not likely to use it, I'll buy it back, bring it back. If you bought it from me in the first place, I know the car, I know what, I know the history and that sort of thing. And I try and keep it as low risk as possible for people that are buying them for the first time. It's like, go and do the summer season in it. When you're finished with it, bring it back.
So what would you say is going for nothing at the moment going a bit newer, sort of 2000s, late 90s, 2000s?
Oh, my favourite 2000s sort of, or late 90s, early 2000s car I've had in the past few years, and the best gearbox I have ever driven was a Honda S2000. And I think when you can still get those with sensible mileage for in the teens, I think that's one. But I think that is absolutely.
Thanks for that tip. I sold mine off.
You
Thanks
should.
for that
You
tip. I
should
sold mine.
They're going to be like price-wise. I think they're going to go like Skylines, aren't they? I don't know, because the prices are already ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I had one that mine had done something like 36,000 miles, and I think I drew about 15, 16 for it, something like that. But yeah, I think, and they are just, it's got to be one of the best driving cars I've ever been in. It was, I mean,
I didn't like
VTEC engines, they were just, I mean, it was a bit snappy. Don't get me wrong, it took me by surprise a few times, but once you get used to the VTEC, I think, because essentially it's a mid-engine car, it sits behind the axle. So although the engine's under the bonnet in front of you, technically, in terms of engineering terms, it's a mid-engine car. I thought it was a real driver's car.